Breaking news, Viking Nation, you're not ready for what's about to hit Minnesota. 5 bombshells, 5 shocks that could redefine everything you thought you knew about this team. A star receiver's future hangs by a thread as rival teams circle like vultures, ready to pounce before the trade deadline slams shut. A quarterback crisis erupts, with injuries piling up faster than the coaching staff can handle, forcing the Vikings into uncharted territory with a rookie nobody saw coming. The franchise quarterback everyone believed in. He's still fighting his way back, but the clock is ticking and patience is running thin. A $66 million weapon might be on the trading block as the front office weighs impossible decisions that could alter the trajectory of this entire season. And the greatest receiver in football right now? He's producing magic, but is Minnesota wasting his prime years? Each of these revelations cuts deep. Each one could be the difference between playoff glory and another year of crushing disappointment. The storm is here. Viking Nation, the chaos is real. And what comes next in the next 30 seconds will shake the foundations of everything you believe about this team's future. If you bleed purple and gold more than you hate the Packers, smash that subscribe button right now, because you're going to need every update we drop. Let's dive into the first revelation, and trust me, it's already sending shockwaves through the league. There's a weapon in Minnesota who's been absolutely electric, a playmaker who defies physics, who creates separation like it's nothing, who hauls and passes that shouldn't be catchable. But right now, his future with the Vikings is hanging by a thread, and rival teams, they're already making calls, they're already plotting, they're already preparing offers that could rip him away from the only NFL home he's ever known. We're talking about Jordan Addison, the second-year receiver out of USC, the guy who was supposed to be the perfect complement to Justin Jefferson for the next decade, the one who averaged more yards per route run than any other receiver in the league this season, the talent who's been producing at an elite level despite quarterback chaos that would destroy most young players. But here's where it gets complicated, Viking Nation. Here's where the nightmare scenario starts to take shape. Addison's future is in doubt, not because of his play on the field, but because of what's happened off it. The legal issues, the missed team meetings, the suspension that cost him 3 games earlier this season. And now, with the trade deadline looming on November 4th, teams around the league are circling. The New England Patriots are reportedly at the front of the line, desperate to give rookie sensation Drake May a legitimate number 1 weapon. They're willing to offer serious draft capital. We're talking a first-round pick in 2026 and a 4th rounder in 2027. That's the kind of haul that makes front offices stop and think. That's the kind of offer that General Manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has to at least consider, even if it tears the heart out of this receiving corps. Think about it for a second. The Vikings are sitting at 3-3 after that brutal loss to the Eagles. They're staring down a short week against the Chargers, then a Sunday showdown with the Lions. If they stumble in both games and hit 3-5 by the trade deadline, they might pivot from buyers to sellers faster than anyone expects. And Addison, he becomes the most valuable trade chip on the roster. Here's what makes this so painful. Addison has been absolutely elite this season when healthy. He's averaging more receiving yards per game than everyone except Puka Nacua and Jamar Chase. He's creating explosive plays in an offense that desperately needs them. He's proving he could be a legitimate number 1 receiver in this league, not just a complimentary piece. But there's the question nobody wants to ask out loud. Can the Vikings afford to pay to elite receivers long-term? Jefferson just signed his massive extension. He's the highest-paid non-quarterback in football. If Addison continues this trajectory, he's going to command serious money when his rookie deal expires. Minnesota would be looking at $50 million or more tied up into receivers. Is that sustainable? Is that smart roster construction? Or do you cash in now while his value is sky high, grab premium draft picks, and trust that Yalen Naylor and the young guys can step up? Albert Breer from NBC Sports Boston laid it out perfectly. He said the Patriots could target a guy like Addison because he helps them now and becomes a pillar for the future. A young receiver still on his rookie deal who can grow alongside Drake May for the next 5 years. That's gold in today's NFL. That's exactly what Bill Belichick wait. He's gone now what Jared Mayo and Elliott Wolf are desperately searching for. So here's the question. Viking Nation, if the phone rings from New England, if they offer that first-round pick, if they dangle more assets, do the Vikings answer? Do they pull the trigger on a trade that makes football sense, or rips out a piece of this offensive soul? Or do they hold firm, believe in Addison's ability to mature off the field, and build around the Jefferson-Addison duo for the next half-decade? The next 2 weeks will tell us everything. And if you think this is as wild as it gets, just wait until you hear what's happening at the most important position on the field. The quarterback situation in Minnesota. It's about to get even more chaotic than you thought possible. But hold on, Viking Nation, because as shocking as that Addison news is, the next update cuts even deeper. We're talking about the most important position in all of sports. We're talking about the quarterback situation. And right now, it's an absolute disaster. J.J. McCarthy is nursing an ankle injury, Carson Wentz is battling a shoulder problem, and the Vikings are staring down a Thursday night football game against the Chargers. With no clear answer under center, this is the nightmare scenario that keeps Kevin O'Connell up at night, short week, injured quarterbacks, national television, division implications on the line, and the very real possibility that an undrafted rookie named Max Brosmer might have to start the biggest game of his life with almost no preparation. Let that sink in for a second. Max Brosmer, the guy who wasn't even drafted this past April, the quarterback who was supposed to be a developmental project, someone you stash on the practice squad and hope develops over 2 or 3 years. He might be taking the first snap on Thursday night in front of millions of viewers. Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk broke the story, and it sent shockwaves through the fan base. Both McCarthy and Wentz were listed as limited participants in Monday's practice, which didn't actually happen because it's a short week and teams just estimate injury reports. But that estimation tells us everything we need to know. Neither guy is healthy. Neither guy is guaranteed to play, and the Vikings might be forced into the ultimate gamble. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Viking Nation. Brosmer has actually impressed in his limited NFL action. The coaching staff loves his poise, his decision-making, his ability to process information quickly. He's not going to wow you with arm strength or athleticism, but he's smart. He's accurate. He makes the right read more often than not. In a different timeline, maybe he becomes a quality backup in this league. But starting in Week 8 on a short week against a hungry Chargers defense, that's asking a lot. That's asking too much. And yet, the Vikings might not have a choice. McCarthy's ankle isn't responding the way the medical staff hoped. Wentz's shoulder is degenerative, the kind of injury that lingers and flares up and never really goes away. O'Connell has said repeatedly that he won't throw McCarthy out there unless he's had a full week of practice. Well, guess what? It's Tuesday, and McCarthy was limited yesterday. The math doesn't add up. Viking Nation, the timeline doesn't work. Which brings us to the nuclear option that nobody saw coming. What if the Vikings make a call to Atlanta? What if they inquire about Kirk Cousins? Yes, that Kirk Cousins, the quarterback who spent 6 years in Minnesota before leaving for a massive deal with the Falcons. The guy who knows this offense inside and out. The veteran who could step in tomorrow and run Kevin O'Connell's system without missing a beat. Florio mentioned it in his report, and at first it sounds insane. But think about it for a second. The Falcons just lost Michael Penix Jr. to a bone bruise. They're stuck with Cousins whether they like it or not, and Atlanta might be willing to eat some salary and recoup draft picks if it means getting out from under that contract a year early. For Minnesota, it would be the ultimate short-term fix. Cousins knows the receivers. He knows the play calls. He knows the building. You could plug him in on November 4th right at the trade deadline and immediately stabilize the most important position on the roster. The Vikings are 3-3 right now, but they're talented enough to make a playoff run if they can just get competent quarterback play. Cousins gives them that. He's not elite anymore, but he's competent. He's steady. He's exactly what this team needs if McCarthy can't go and Wentz continues to break down. But here's the problem, Viking Nation. Here's why this might not happen. Pride.ego. The acknowledgement that letting Cousins walk in free agency was a massive miscalculation. Bringing him back would be admitting that the plan failed. That gambling on McCarthy's rookie development was too aggressive. That Carson Wentz as a bridge quarterback was never going to work. And front offices hate admitting they were wrong. So what happens Thursday night? Does McCarthy somehow get through the ankle injury and take the field? Does Wentz play hero one more time despite a shoulder that's hanging by a thread? Or does Max Brosmer get the start and shock the world? We'll know in less than 72 hours. And if you think this quarterback chaos is the end of the drama, you haven't been paying attention. Because the quarterback everyone believed would save this franchise, His story is about to take another dark turn. Stay with me, Viking Nation, because what comes next will flip the script in ways nobody predicted. We're talking about J.J. McCarthy, the 10th overall pick in the 2025 draft, the quarterback who was supposed to be the savior, the Michigan man who won a national championship and convinced Minnesota's front office he was worth trading up for. He's back. He's practicing. He's healthy enough to be on the field, but he's not starting. Not yet. Maybe not Thursday. Maybe not for a while. And that should terrify every single person who bleeds purple and gold. Kevin O'Connell laid out the plan weeks ago. He said McCarthy would need a full week of practice before he'd even consider starting him. Not a limited week. Not a couple of walkthroughs and a jog through on Friday. A full week. Practice Wednesday, practice Thursday, practice Friday, then play Sunday. That's the requirement O'Connell set, and he's sticking to it. But here's the problem. It's Tuesday, and McCarthy was limited in Monday's estimated practice. The ankle injury that knocked him out against the Eagles is still bothering him. He's not moving at full speed. He's not planning on throws the way you need at this level. And with a short week before Thursday Night Football, there's simply no time for him to check all the boxes O'Connell requires. So what does Minnesota do? They elevate him to QB2. They move him from emergency third-string quarterback where he was last week as a glorified spectator to legitimate backup. And that might sound like progress, but think about what it really means. It means McCarthy still isn't ready to start. It means the coaching staff doesn't trust him enough to hand him the keys to the offense. It means we're 7 weeks into the season and the guy they traded up for is still sitting on the bench while a 33-year-old journeyman and an undrafted rookie handle the snaps. That's not development. Viking Nation, that's disaster. Let's talk about what we've actually seen from J.J. McCarthy in his limited NFL action. 2 games, the starts back in weeks 1 and 2 before the ankle injury derailed everything. And the results? They were ugly. He completed just 58.5% of his passes. He threw for 301 total yards across both games. He had the touchdowns, but 3 interceptions. And maybe worst of all, 3 fumbles. That's 8 turnovers or potential turnovers into games. You can't win in the NFL playing like that. You can't compete when your quarterback is putting the ball on the ground and throwing it to the wrong team more often than he's making explosive plays. And yet, there were flashes. There were moments where you could see the talent. The touchdown pass against the Bears that he squeezed into a window that shouldn't have existed. The scramble against Atlanta where he turned broken play into positive yards. The Michigan magic. That made him a first-round pick in the first place. But flashes aren't enough, Viking Nation. Not when you're 3-3 and staring at a brutal stretch that includes the Chargers, the Lions, and whoever else stands between Minnesota and a playoff spot. O'Connell needs consistency. He needs a quarterback who protects the football. He needs someone who can execute the game plan without self-destructing. And right now, J.J. McCarthy hasn't proven he can do that at the NFL level. So what's the plan moving forward? Best case scenario, McCarthy practices fully next week and reclaims the starting job for Week 9. He gets a full week of preparation. His ankle is 100%, and he comes out against whoever's next on the schedule looking like the quarterback everyone believed he could be. But what if that doesn't happen? What if the ankle lingers? What if McCarthy practices fully but still struggles in the games that matter? What if the turnovers keep piling up and the mistakes keep mounting and the Vikings find themselves falling out of playoff contention because they gambled on a rookie who wasn't ready? That's the nightmare scenario nobody wants to talk about. That's the reality that Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah are privately terrified of. Because if McCarthy can't be the guy this year, what does that say about the future? What does that say about the decision to trade up and grab him at 10? What does that say about letting Kirk Cousins walk in free agency? The next few weeks will define J.J. McCarthy's career trajectory. Either he steps up, proves the doubters wrong, and becomes the franchise quarterback Minnesota desperately needs, or he becomes another cautionary tale about drafting quarterbacks too early and expecting miracles too soon. And if you think the quarterback position is the only area where Minnesota is facing tough decisions, wait until you hear about the $66 million weapon who might be on his way out the door. And listen closely, Viking Nation, because the next chapter is the kind of news that divides a fan base right down the middle. We're talking about T.J. Hockenson. The tight end Minnesota traded a second and third round pick to acquire from Detroit. The weapon they signed to a 4-year, $66 million extension. The guy who was supposed to be the perfect safety valve for whatever quarterback lined up under center. But right now, with the trade deadline approaching and this team sitting at 3-3 with more questions than answers, there's legitimate buzz that Minnesota might listen to offers. They might actually pick up the phone if a contender calls asking about Hockenson's availability. And if that happens, it would signal something massive about where this franchise thinks it's headed. Let's start with the uncomfortable truth. TJ Hockenson is not playing like a $66 million tight end right now. He's averaging just 7.8 yards per reception. He's got 1 touchdown through 6 games. That's unacceptable for a player making the kind of money he's making. For context, Johnny Munn, a backup tight end who barely sees the field, averaged 9.3 yards per reception in his limited action last year. Hockenson is supposed to be an elite weapon. He's supposed to be a matchup nightmare who creates explosive plays and moves the chains. But in 2025, he's been average at best. Now, to be fair, there are reasons for the decline. Kevin O'Connell has talked about it publicly. Hockenson has taken on a much bigger role as a blocker this season. He's staying in the pass protect more. He's chipping defensive ends and linebackers instead of releasing into routes. That's a team-first mentality, and it deserves respect. But it also raises a massive question. If you're paying a tight end $66 million to block, are you using that money correctly? Couldn't you find a cheaper player who does the same thing and spend those resources elsewhere? That's the calculation Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is making right now behind closed doors. And here's where it gets really interesting. The Vikings have invested heavily in young tight ends over the past year. They drafted Gavin Bartholomew in the 6th round of the 2025 draft. He's on injured reserve right now, but he's a developmental piece they believe in long term. They signed undrafted free agents Ben Yurosek and Bryson Nesbitt. Yurosek is on the 53-man roster. Nesbitt is stashed on the practice squad. And then there's Josh Oliver, the veteran backup who just signed a 3-year extension worth over $23 million. The Vikings clearly believe Oliver is a long-term piece of this offense, so add it all up. Viking Nation, you've got a tight end making elite money who's not producing elite stats. You've got multiple young tight ends in the pipeline who could develop into quality contributors. You've got a coaching staff that's using Hockenson more as a blocker than a pass catcher. And you've got a trade deadline looming where contending teams think Kansas City, Buffalo, Philadelphia might be desperate for a proven weapon who can help them win now. What's Hockenson's trade value? That's the $1 million question, or actually, the $66 million question. Any team that trades for him wouldn't inherit the full contract. The Vikings have already paid most of the signing bonus. A new team would take on roughly 2.5 years at a manageable cap hit. For a contender that's 1 piece away from a Super Bowl, that's an easy decision. You give up a 2nd-round pick, maybe a 3rd as well, and you add a proven tight end who can contribute immediately. For Minnesota, you'd absorb about $5.3 million in dead cap money, but you'd free up over $16 million in space going forward. That's massive flexibility. That's the ability to address other needs at the trade deadline or in free agency next year. And if Bartholomew develops the way they hope, if Yurosek steps up, if Oliver continues to be a reliable number 2, you might not even miss Hockenson. But here's the emotional argument. Viking Nation, here's why this trade might never happen. Hockenson is beloved in that locker room. He's a leader. He's a tone setter. He's the kind of player who does all the little things right even when the stats don't show it. Trading him sends a message that this team is waving the white flag on 2025. It tells Justin Jefferson and the rest of the offensive weapons that management doesn't believe this roster is good enough to compete. And if you're trying to convince your superstar receiver that you're building something special, trading away a key piece of the offense is not the way to do it. So what happens? Does Kwesi Adofo-Mensah take the call if Kansas City offers a 2nd-round pick? Does he pull the trigger if Buffalo goes even higher? Or does he hold firm, trust that Hockenson will turn it around in the second half, and bet on this team's ability to make a playoff run? We'll find out November 4th. And if you think the tight end situation is complicated, wait until you hear about the problem that's keeping the entire front office up at night. We're talking about the greatest receiver in football. We're talking about Justin Jefferson. And we're talking about the very real possibility that Minnesota is wasting his prime years. And here we are, Viking Nation, the final revelation, the one that cuts deepest, the one that should haunt every single person in that front office every single night. Justin Jefferson is the best receiver in football. Not one of the best, not top 3, not in the conversation. He is the best, the most talented, the most explosive, the most impossible to cover. And right now, the Minnesota Vikings are wasting him. Let that sink in for a second. Wasting him. Jefferson is 26 years old. He's in the absolute prime of his career. He just signed an extension that makes him the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, but it's actually a bargain compared to what he'll be worth in 2 or 3 years when the cap keeps exploding. This is the window. This is the time when everything should be coming together. Elite receiver locked up long-term, talented young quarterback on a rookie deal, cap space to add pieces, a coaching staff that knows how to scheme. Everything is aligned for Minnesota to make a serious playoff run, contend for division titles, maybe even push for a Super Bowl. But instead, they're 3-3 after a loss to a beatable Eagles team. They're dealing with quarterback chaos. They're contemplating trades that would gut the roster instead of strengthening it. And Justin Jefferson is putting up good numbers, 34 catches, 528 yards through 6 games, but he's got just 1 touchdown. 1. That's not Jefferson's fault. That's a quarterback problem. That's a scheme problem. That's a red zone problem that Kevin O'Connell and the offensive staff haven't figured out. Jefferson is doing everything right. He's creating separation. He's winning one-on-one matchups. He's making contested catches. But if the quarterback can't get him the ball, if the play calling doesn't maximize his skill set, if the supporting cast around him isn't good enough to take pressure off, then what's the point? Here's the comparison nobody wants to make, but everyone should be thinking about. Myles Garrett, the Cleveland Browns edge rusher, who will go down as one of the greatest defensive players in NFL history. He spent his entire career on a dysfunctional Browns team that's wasted his talent year after year after year. He'll retire with incredible individual stats and maybe 0 playoff wins, 0 Super Bowl appearances, 0 rings. Is that Justin Jefferson's future? Is that where this is headed if the Vikings don't figure it out fast? Because right now, Minnesota has made the playoffs in back-to-back years exactly once in the last 15 years, 2008 and 2009. That's it. Since then, it's been a revolving door of one-and-done playoff appearances or missing the postseason entirely. That's unacceptable when you have a generational talent like Jefferson on the roster. This isn't just about winning games. Viking Nation, it's about maximizing the window while you have it. It's about surrounding Jefferson with enough talent, a reliable quarterback, a dominant offensive line, playmakers on the fence that he can do what he does best, and this team can actually compete for championships. Because if they don't, if they waste the next 3 or 4 years spinning their wheels with mediocre quarterback play and mid-tier rosters and constant roster churn, Jefferson will request a trade. He'll force his way to Kansas City or Buffalo or Philadelphia or wherever he thinks he can actually win. And when that happens, when the best receiver in football leaves Minnesota because the front office couldn't build around him, it will be the biggest organizational failure in franchise history. So here's the question for Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell and the entire Vikings leadership. Are you all in on contending right now? Are you willing to make the tough moves at the trade deadline, bringing in a proven quarterback, adding defensive pieces, doing whatever it takes to give this roster a legitimate shot at the playoffs and beyond? Or are you hedging your bets, playing it safe, hoping that J.J. McCarthy develops faster than expected and everything magically works out? Because half measures won't cut it. Viking Nation, not when you have Justin Jefferson, not when the window is open right now. This team needs to decide what it is: contender or pretender, buyer or seller, all in or rebuilding. And they need to decide fast, because the trade deadline is November 4th, and every day that passes without a clear direction is another day wasted in the Justin Jefferson era. If this week felt like an earthquake, Viking Nation, what's coming in the next 2 weeks could be the aftershock that topples the entire season. The Chargers on Thursday night, the Lions next Sunday, to games that will define where this team is headed, to games that will force Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's hand at the trade deadline. And if the Vikings stumble, if they fall to 3-5, all bets are off. Jordan Addison could be gone. DJ Hockenson could be shipped out. This roster could look completely different by November 5th. But if they win, if they somehow find a way to get to 5-3 heading into the deadline, then maybe, just maybe, Minnesota becomes buyers. Maybe they make a move for a cornerback or a defensive tackle or even a quarterback. Maybe they go all in on this season and give Justin Jefferson the supporting cast he deserves. That's the fork in the road, Viking Nation. That's the next 72 hours. And if you love this team, if you believe in the purple and gold more than you hate the Packers and the Lions and every other rival in this league, then you better be watching every single second, because what happens next will define the Minnesota Vikings for the next decade. Skol. Viking Nation, skol.